Beijing is currently moving toward the delivery of fifth generation fighters to Pakistan, providing India with the most significant intelligence haul of the 21st century. Understanding this strategic blunder requires looking at the cold reality of the balance sheet. China functions as a high tech department store masquerading as a global superpower, and India remains their most lucrative customer. That trade imbalance serves as a massive multi-billion-dollar leash keeping Beijing's manufacturing ghost towns from turning into actual graveyards. We buy their phones, their LED lights, their raw materials, and the very components that power our digital lives. In any sane world, a shopkeeper avoids brawling in the street with the guy who keeps his lights on. A shopkeeper smiles and drains the customer's pockets while secretly hoping the customer never realizes the premium goods on the shelf consist mostly of clever plastic and stolen IP. This represents the bedrock of the China India relationship. They stay away from a hot war with India to avoid incinerating their own ledger. However, the shopkeeper feels a deeper, more primal fear. Beijing sees the customer getting so rich and capable that he opens his own shop and starts supplying the world as a direct competitor. They see India exporting BrahMos to the Philippines, realizing a self reliant India signals the death knell for Chinese market dominance. They look at their favorite neighbor, the perpetual beggar across the street who turned asking for a loan into a national identity, and decide to use him as a proxy to keep India pinned down and distracted. When China delivers their supposedly state of the art fifth generation J35 to Pakistan in the coming years, they will be deploying a test subject for Indian sensors. We need to look at what this jet actually is behind the CGI flypasts. The J35 emerged from one of the largest cyber heights in human history rather than a flash of original Chinese engineering. Back in 2009, Chinese hackers successfully infiltrated the servers of Lockheed Martin and its subcontractors, lifting terabytes of data related to the F 35 Lightning II. They took the blueprints for the sensors, the engine components, and the very shape of the fuselage. This explains why the J35 looks like an F-35 that went through a photocopier twice. It has the same distinctive nose, the same diverterless supersonic inlet bumps, and the canopy profile is identical. Even the electro-optical targeting system, that little glass chin under the nose, is a visual replica of the American version. They essentially tried to Control C the Joint Strike Fighter program, but Control V engineering comes with a catch. You can copy the shape of a high tech shoe without replicating the chemistry of the glue that holds the sole together at high speeds. This is the first copy hierarchy in action. The Chinese spent years trying to make these stolen blueprints fly. They struggled with the internal weapons base, they struggled with the stealth coatings, and they failed to copy the F-135 engine. Lacking the metallurgy secrets required for the American engine, they had to settle for a twin engine layout using the WS-13 or the WS-21. These function as upgraded versions of the old Russian RD-93, an engine designed in the 1970s. This creates a massive flaw. The J-35 might look like a stealth fighter, but it breathes like a Victorian era coal factory. It produces a massive heat signature and a visible smoke trail that makes stealth a hilarious misnomer. The stuff China keeps for itself is the first copy, while the jets they are prepping for Pakistan are the second copy. The hardware that failed quality control in Shenyang. They are giving the beggar the shoes meant for the incinerator, and the beggar is already prepping for a victory lap, completely oblivious to his new jet being a loud, expensive beacon for Indian radars. Look at the reality of Chinese wonder weapons before we get carried away by their propaganda. Remember the PL-15E. Before that missile was seen in the wild, the Chinese chatter was deafening. They called it the Amram killer, a missile with such extreme range and sophisticated seeker tech that it would turn the Indian Air Force into a collection of falling lawn darts. In a high stakes electronic environment, that mighty PL-15E suffered a complete nervous breakdown. Indian electronic warfare suites jammed the living daylights out of it. The missile lost its mind, forgot which way was up, and fell out of the sky like a $5 million paperweight. It lacked even the dignity to self destruct. It went plop into the dirt as a dud and a silent monument to the fact that propaganda doesn't guide missiles through a contested electromagnetic spectrum. Stolen engineering failed against original preparedness. The Chinese spent billions on the brochure, and we spent pennies on the jammer that turned their pride into a lawn dart. The failures extend well beyond the air to air stuff. Look at the HQ 9 air defense system. On paper, it's an impenetrable bubble, a sentinel that makes the S-400 look like a vintage toy. When it came down to actually protecting Pakistani air bases, even places as critical as Kirana Hills, this omnipotent vision proved blind and silent. It failed to save a single hangar from being visited by whatever India decided to send over that day. We've seen this pattern with the JF-17 Thunder and the J-10C. They talk about thunder, but all we hear is a pathetic whimper from an engine held together by zip ties and a prayer to the lenders. These jets fail to protect their own airspace during our precision visits, and their radars have the detection capability of a retired security guard with cataracts. They fail to pick up a slow moving quadcopter, so their chances of handling a saturation strike of supersonic BrahMos missiles are non existent. A BrahMos moves with a temper that the Chinese radars can't even process, let alone intercept. Chinese junk remains untested in the crucible of real war, existing only as a product tested in the boardroom of a marketing agency. Everything they build is a cheap copy of a Russian airframe or a hacked Western design. They are the masters of the lookalike, but when the metal meets the air, the flaws start screaming. This upcoming move makes Pakistan getting the J-35 a strategic masterstroke for India. Stealth is a game of shadows where the shadows disappear once you turn on a specific type of light. For years, India has been staring at the J-20 across the Himalayas, trying to decipher its radar signature through the thick, cluttered mess of mountain echoes. Collecting data on a ghost that lives in a fortress is a difficult task. When that ghost moves into your neighbor's garage, the neighbor becomes a guy who can't stop bragging about his new toys. Pakistan's air bases sit right in our backyard. Every time a Pakistani pilot takes a J-35 up for a routine sortie, Indian sensors will be feasting. Our ELINT, our SIGINT, our ground-based radars and our EDWACS will be listening to every hum, every whistle and every electronic emission of those Chinese engines. We will be mapping out the exact heat signature, the specific radar cross section from every conceivable angle, and the vulnerabilities of its stealth skin. It's the single biggest intelligence opportunity in the history of the subcontinent. Pakistan is volunteering to be a live fire laboratory for Indian technology. They'll fly these jets to Saudi Arabia to show off to their donors, hoping for a few more reals to buy fuel. They'll fly them over their own cities to distract the public from the fact that they can't afford wheat or basic dignity. Every single flight is a gift to the Indian Air Force. We are getting the blueprints of China's 5th gen crown jewel for free, without having to fire a single shot. By the time India actually has to face a Chinese J-20 or J-35 in a real conflict, we will already have the cheat codes programmed into our jammers. We are learning how to rig the game while the opponent thinks he's still in control. The most important part of this entire saga is the effect it has on the Indian government. For too long, the Indian bureaucracy has acted like a sleepy giant that only moves when poked with a very sharp, very public stick. We have these populist schemes and various handouts that eat into the defense budget because votes in this country often come from short term freebies. We've been sitting on the AMCA project for years, debating and moving at the speed of a tired snail. When the J-35 finally lands in Sargodha, the threat becomes tangible and right next door. The government can no longer tell the Indian public that we are preparing when the neighbor who can't pay his electricity bill just bought a stealth fighter on a high interest loan. This is the ultimate wake up and smell the coffee moment that kills complacency. It forces the government's hand to stop the populist leakages and dump that money into strategic depth. The moment Pakistan gets its hands on that Chinese junk, India will likely pull the trigger on a stopgap solution that will make Islamabad's head spin. We are talking about finally bringing in the F-35, the real Fat Amy or the Su-57 in significant numbers to bridge the gap. While the J-35 is a second copy of a hacked design, the F-35 is the gold standard of sensor fusion and actual combat-proven stealth. If India inducts the F-35 as a bridge, the technological gap will widen into a canyon that no amount of Chinese aid can fill. This pressure will turn the DRDO and HAL from a bureaucratic committee into a war room operation. The pace of AMCA development will shift from experimental to emergency. We will see prototypes flying sooner, testing happening faster, and production lines being laid down with a sense of urgency that only a neighborhood threat can provide. Think about the long game. China thinks they are being clever by arming Pakistan to pin India down, but they are actually accelerating India's transformation into a military superpower. They are forcing us to do what we should have done 20 years ago while they remain dependent on our market. They need our money to build the jets they give to Pakistan, which we then use to study and defeat the jets China keeps for themselves. It's a self defeating cycle of arrogance. Every dollar we spend on a Chinese made toy is a dollar that eventually funds a Pakistani drone, but it also creates the very threat that forces the Indian tiger to finally sharpen its claws. The desperation in Pakistan is palpable. They are selling off national assets, selling donkeys by the thousands to China for hides and meat, and yet they think a few fifth gen airframes will save them. It is a nation trying to buy a tuxedo while they don't have enough money for a loaf of bread. China knows this, they are treating Pakistan like a garbage disposal unit for their second tier tech. We are slowly opening our own shop, and the Chinese are terrified that the global customer base will realize the Indian original is far more reliable than the Chinese first copy. By trying to use Pakistan to sabotage our progress, China is actually giving us the exact training manual we need to make our systems invincible. Every time a J35 takes off from a Pakistani airbase, it provides the electromagnetic data that allows our engineers to refine our radars. India is the land of Aryabhata and Kama Sutra. We invented the zero and have spent thousands of years mastering the complexities of human interaction, mathematics, and the art of the long game. We know how to navigate the most intricate systems of pleasure and pain, applying that same cultural depth to our strategic thinking. We have already calculated the trajectory of your downfall. We will find ways to dismantle your stealth that your engineers haven't even dreamed of yet. We will fuck you in more ways than you can count, precisely because we are the ones who taught you how to count in the first place. I am honestly overwhelmed with gratitude for the incredible support lately. To everyone joining the channel as a member and those generously backing our narrative army via super thanks and the people hyping my videos, thank you. Your support makes this work possible.